Good morning, everybody. I am struggling, but hopefully I can just keep my levels up so you can hear me. If not, somebody will have to come and rescue me. So this morning, we really want to just give you an update on the work we've been doing in CIHT around the review of local roads. So I'm going to give a presentation, a few slides, and then we want to sort of open up for a general debate about where we are and how we're going forward in this. So that's the format of this morning, and lots of opportunities for all of you to ask questions as we go into the discussion piece. So yeah, I'm delighted to be here. I'm very proud of the work we've been doing. And if you wind the clock back, we started this about a year ago. And you think, well, what have we been doing in a year? Well, I think we've been doing an awful lot. And I think, the thing about local roads is they're so important to our economy and social well-being, because as we all know, every journey starts and ends on a local road. And one of the things that's been happening during this review has been the work of the Transport Select Committee. And I think it was so good that they endorsed many of the things that we were saying. And actually, their conclusion was that the current short-term approach to funding local road maintenance is not fit for purpose. And I think everybody in this hall would agree with that. We really need to do something fundamentally different to ensure we invest in our local road network. So one of the things we did quite early on was to do a survey of the industry, and we got this sort of feedback. Probably not surprising, but I think it's quite useful because it endorsed quite a lot of what we were thinking. And one of the big issues for local highway authorities is that the money that comes through from government is not ring-fenced. Even the capital is not ring-fenced. So there's nothing to stop a local highway authority building a school with the money that comes for local roads. So one of the issues that we've been saying is that money needs to be protected. In a scenario where there's so much economic pressure for local highway authorities, some authorities have been going broke. The scale of the cost of social care and education is in order, and we really need to protect the precious budget for local roads. The other aspect to this is this thing called TOTEX. So this isn't an oil company. It's about a joint funding for revenue and capital. Because one of the big issues that local authorities had is not so much the capital, but the revenue. And the revenue situation is dire. So many authorities have lost nearly half of their revenue. And if you think about what the revenue's for, it's that day-to-day routine maintenance that protects the integrity of that local road network. And if we're not doing the fundamentals, then it doesn't matter how much capital we throw at it, we're going to compromise the investment. So, again, the feedback was that we want a fund for local roads. And let's think about that in the context. So, in the budget last year, the government announced that a vehicle licence duty was going to be hypothecated to fund a strategic road fund and a major road fund, but nothing for local roads. So why should local roads be the poor relation in this context? Why shouldn't local roads have their own funding streams specifically for them? And the other issue that we raised was about longevity. So even though we've had a 5-year indicative capital allocation the last 5 years, it's not been secure. So what local authorities cry out for in order to do good asset management, to get good investment through the supply chain, is that certainty of that investment over a longer period. And what we've been saying is actually even 5 years is not long enough to get those economic benefits. So we want a minimum of 5 years. So the good news is the Transport Select Committee supported much of what we were saying in terms of that need for long-term front loading of funding to address the historic backlog. And they should consult with local authorities. This TOTEX thing is quite difficult in terms of where the money comes from in two parts of government, and it's hard enough engaging with one part of government, let alone two, and the difficulties around that TOTEX scenario. Nevertheless, they wanted DFT to engage with local authorities and talk about whether that was feasible. And since the Select Committee have given their recommendations, and this brings us right up to date, because only last week the government responded to the Select Committee. And it was, again, a very positive response. So we really are pushing at an open door here. But, with all the uncertainty about political change, we still don't know whether this is going to happen or not. But nevertheless, we're doing everything we can. The Select Committee are, and even DFT recognise the need for this investment. So they've said we will ensure that priorities for long-term funding for local highway maintenance are understood. So it's really important when that new government gets in place in the new year that we engage with them and we make sure they're on this case. The other issue, which was quite disappointing, and you think about all the investment in scanner and asset management, that we don't have a standard approach to condition data. So when we want to compare, when we want to aggregate at national level, there's complete inconsistency now in terms of how local authority collect that data. Similarly, when we measure backlog with local highway authorities, we're all calculating it on a different basis. So the figures that you get in the alarm survey, are an estimate, but the accuracy is very questionable because every authority is doing it on a different basis. So what we're recommending, or what we were saying in this survey, what were the feedback we were getting, is 96% of respondents said we should have a standard approach. So again, the Select Committee were very supportive, recognising the need for getting better data. And I think the point that CHT were making is it's not just about carriageway. In fact, we have a reasonable handle on carriageway condition. But if you think about it in terms of the importance of the wider asset base, in terms of the road users walking and cycling, footways, cycleways, signs, signals, they're all important components of a local authority asset base. And they're the things that we also need: good condition data, good inventory, and we know we'll be able to know what the levels of investment are. So they've recommended that DFT do some work around this in terms of particularly around using new technology. And there's big question marks, I think, about scanner and is it fit for purpose for the future. So as we speak, again, DFT have already recognised this and actually have sent out a survey to all local highway authorities. So if there's anybody from a local highway authority in this audience now, I really encourage you to complete that questionnaire so the DFT can get a good database in terms of what currently is going on within local authorities and to help give better advice for the future around how that's carried out. And not surprisingly, 98% said that governments should consider change now. I'm not sure what the other 2% was saying, but really I'm surprised that that isn't at 100. So status quo is not an option. For our local node network, we've got to do something. We've got to do it soon. So the other aspect that the Select Committee talked about was around innovation and about trying to corral innovation more effectively from different government departments. And I think there's been good progress in this around the things like the smart labs, which quite a lot of local authorities are contributing to. So DFT again recognised that and made related to that in their response. And then finally, the issue around the governance and monitoring, and the view was that perhaps DFT needs to do some further work around what effective monitoring system should we have for local roads, because the issue that we identified was that in terms of the user, there is no a national monitoring around how local authorities are performing. Clearly there are things at a local level, scrutiny, but nothing at a national level to compare and contrast how individual authorities are performing. And that may form part of how local authorities are going to be funded in the future if the self-assessment is going to be developed in more of an outcome-based approach. So the government recognised the work that CHT are doing in terms of the report, in terms of what we're looking at in what is fit for the future, how we can look at how we can improve that monitoring process. And they actually referenced our report in their response. Just going to skip these. So, in terms of the work we're doing, clearly funding is the key issue, And I think one of the things that we want to start talking today about is how much funding, because we all know that we need more. The alarm survey talked about a 10 billion backlog. Other work within individual authorities has said actually we need more than that. But what do we actually need to bring our local road network and all the other assets up to a safe and serviceable standard? And that's something that we want to put on the table to government based on hard evidence around different scenarios. Clearly, data is absolutely essential, and we want to make it clear what our thinking is in terms of what data is needed. And the danger in data is that we collect a lot of information and that's not used. It's really important that we use appropriate data that's easily to collect and it's going to be useful. I mentioned about monitoring outcomes. So at the moment, all the money that local authority gets, there's no question or challenge about how effectively that money has been spent. There's been questions about process, through the self-assessment, through asset management, good procurement, good processes. But actually, what about the outcome? What are local authorities actually achieving with that investment in terms of the improvement they're getting on those assets? And we do want to explore new sources of funding, because local authorities are being very creative and innovative in terms of how to bridge that gap between government funding and their own money. And that's through things like commercialisation, looking at drawing down other investment through loans, and there are maybe other ways of doing that. But ultimately, maybe we should push on this some form of pay-as-you-go, because ultimately, in my view, the local road network is a utility, and in that respect, we need an income generation, an income source to make sure that there is money generated to pay for its investment. And I think in overall terms, and this is something that CIHT are not saying is just part of this review, but have said over time, we do not have a national transport strategy in this country. And I suppose if nothing else for a message for a new government, we don't want a road strategy, we don't want an airport strategy, we don't want a rail strategy. Well, actually we do want all of those, but we want something that sits over it and that says, this is a transport strategy, and all those other things are subsets to that help contribute to deliver that overall strategy. So my voice is just about to go, but I hope you found that as a useful intro, and I really am not going to be able to chair the debate. So thank you very much for listening, and hopefully you'll look forward for this report to be released, hopefully early in the new year. And I do honestly believe that it will make a difference. Thank you very much.